Ladies and gentlemen,
Good evening.
are you ready?
Okay, here we go.
You're listening to the Deal Room Podcast. Join us as we bring you the inside scoop on business sales and acquisitions. Get across trends in the area and hear the industry's best recount their real-life tips, traps, and experiences. Now, here's your host, Joanna Oakey.
Hi, it's Joanna Oakey here, and welcome back to the Deal Room Podcast, a podcast proudly brought to you by our commercial legal practice, Aspect Legal. Now, today we have a bit of a different show. We have our Ask Me Anything episode today. So these are questions that I have been provided by you as the listeners or along the journey in our day-to-day practice that I want to provide answers to you for in a quick podcast session. So today I'll run through a few. If you have a question that you'd like me to answer, then please send it to us at podcasts@aspectlegal.com.au, and we'll put that link in the show note. Now, here we go with a very quick session for you. Chris, who have some questions in Ask Me Anything, welcome on board. What are some of the questions that you hear that I could answer?
Yeah, sure, Joe. So one of the interesting things that, as we've discussed, that we buy and sell businesses. In my experience, though, it's very hard to sell a business without having to sign up to a set of warranties and indemnities. However, one of the things I've found is that sometimes lawyers, particularly those that haven't done a lot of business transactions, they advise their clients not to agree or to substantially change what are pretty standard terms and conditions in terms of warranties and indemnities. So I'm interested in your advice on, how do you approach sort of the negotiation and what your view on what sort of fair and reasonable warranties and indemnities in a contract or sale are?
Such a good topic, because I find that sellers quite often have just not even turned their mind to this as they come into a sale. And sometimes in fact, I don't even mean sometimes, almost always, they can be very overwhelmed by the risk in their mind as to the warranties that they read through, because quite often these warranties, depending on the the size of the contract, but they go for pages. Like, this is the reality. And when we're on buy side, we see the frustration that you're talking about right now with overly conservative lawyers or lawyers who just don't understand what is market practice there's a general approach, I guess, for M&A transactions, but it can also differ based on the industries as well. So there can be different approaches from industry to industry. And one of the first things is, I think, that open and honest conversation with a seller, that this is a routine, normal part of selling their business, and the warranties will look different depending on whether it's a business sale transaction, which is an asset sale, or a share sale. Obviously, it's them understanding the reasons that a buyer requires them. I think that's the very first thing, that them understanding that it's normal conceptually, them understanding why a buyer would want them, but then them having full and frank discussions with them to understand where the real risk sits in their business from their perspective. And so I guess it's that general discussion, but then there's always these elements that will be added into a contract that will help minimize the indemnities that are provided. So, we limit time frame, and time frame often is cut up between various types of warranties that sit in the contract. And then we also will have caps, and then we'll have thresholds. And there's all these sorts of things to contain the way in which it works. And I think my experience is, as you work sellers through these areas, as you talk about the commercial reality of them, and then you talk about the protections that are put in there but that are commercial, you really, sellers get into that mindset of understanding. And I think one of the other things that we talk about with our sellers as well is transaction liability insurance, which is warranty and indemnity insurance. There's some great new insurance in the marketplace here in Australia that is this warranty and indemnity insurance used to be extremely expensive, and it used to be more a buy-side insurance. And certainly for the larger transaction sizes, that is still the case. But for our SME deals, so, say our sales below that $5 to $10 million point, there's great insurance products on the market that are relatively cheap. In fact, they're very cheap. They're sell side, not buy side, but they create a lot of, for our very nervous sellers, which, sometimes we have very nervous sellers, notwithstanding everything that we sort of work them through. They are greatly comforted by the opportunity to get an insurance policy to protect them as well. So that's the discussion that we have, and they're the sorts of protections that we offer our sellers to consider in order to feel not totally exposed.
Absolutely. I mean, I think certainly one of the things I've seen is that there is a set of what you said, kind of like market warranties, indemnities. And, one of the interesting things, I mean, we've been acquiring businesses for a long time, and we have never once ever of any of the businesses we've acquired claimed on any warranty or any indemnity. And I think sometimes people tie themselves in knots around, what happens if this happens, or what happens if that happens, without sort of thinking about what's the probability of that happening, and that's a really important thing.
Yes, that's an absolutely brilliant point. Wonderful. And have you got any other Ask Me Anything?
I do. So on that note, so it's kind of related. How should somebody choose the right lawyer to represent them? Because one of the things I've seen in our business is that, people sort of think, I'm selling my business, I'm going to go to my, my standard lawyer who helped me with my property lease last time. And sometimes we find that lawyer might not have had much experience in selling businesses or advising clients on the sale of businesses. So how would you advise someone on how to select a lawyer that's going to represent their interests well?
Really good question. One that we're asked a lot, actually. And so we, and I promise you, this is not a leading question that Chris is asking. This is his actual question.
It's not. I actually came up with it myself, because one of the things I find is that we say to people, hey, when you're choosing your lawyer, make sure they've done some transactions.
100%.
And of course, we can recommend them certain lawyers, but of course they don't want recommendations from us, because there's a bias there. So it's really good to get a third party like yourself to sort of say, well, how would you choose them? You are a lawyer who specialises in this space. How would you choose? Well,
we have a choosing a lawyer checklist that we have available for anyone who wants it, and because you're absolutely right. The questions that you need to ask, or the information that you need to get, is that understanding of how often the lawyer has dealt with these types of transactions. So that's absolutely critical. But simply asking them may not reveal the answers that you want. So there's actually a series of questions that we have in this checklist. So it's, it relates to the frequency with which they deal in dealing with M&A, number one, and dealing within your industry, number two. So that's, I've put a lot of thought into that, because it's an issue that we have seen again and again. And once again, we see the issue as well, the exact same issue that you're seeing, because we always have counterparties, so lawyers acting for the other side, every time we work on a transaction, and we see the very large variances in experience and understanding in the industry, and it's a huge problem, and something that we're very keen. We want to work on a transaction with lawyers on the other side who know what they're doing in the area, because it just makes it better for all around. I think that's my perspective.
Absolutely, and that's one of the interesting things. A lot of people sort of think, well, isn't it worse if we're a buyer of a business? Isn't it better for us if the lawyer on the other side is inexperienced? And the answer is no. We would much prefer an experienced lawyer on the other side who's done a ton of these sorts of transactions because the process is quicker. There aren't debates about things that actually don't really matter, and the debate and the discussion is about the things that actually do matter for both parties. And I feel that when we're dealing, when we're acquiring a business with a seller who's got good representation, that makes an enormous difference, and it increases the likelihood of the transaction going forward.
Brilliant. Wonderful. Well, thank you very much, Chris, and thanks for coming onto the podcast.
No worries. Thanks, Joe. Good to be here.
Well, that's it for our Ask Me Anything episode today. I hope you found that useful. Now, we've got a few more of these style podcasts coming up soon. I find it invaluable to be able to answer these top-of-mind questions, whether they're from our guests, our audience, or our client. Now, if you have a specific topic or question that you'd like us to discuss, then submit your Ask Me Anything questions to podcast@aspectlegal.com.au, or check out the show notes to this episode where we will link right through to an email for you to submit your Ask Me Anything questions. And an important reminder that if you would like any legal assistance with matters that you're working on at the moment, then don't forget you can book in for an initial free call directly with our legal eagles at Aspect Legal by heading to our homepage at aspectlegal.com.au. Well, that's it for me today. My name is Joanna Oakey, and you've been listening to another wonderful episode of our podcast, proudly brought to you by our commercial legal practice, Aspect Legal. See you next time. Aspect Legal has a number of great services that help businesses prepare for a sale or acquisition, to help them prepare in advance and to get transaction ready. We've also got a range of services to help guide businesses through the sale and acquisitions process. We work with clients both big and small and have different types of services depending on size and complexity. We provide a free consultation to discuss your proposed sale or acquisition. So see our show notes on how to book a time to speak with us, or head over to our website at aspectlegal.com.au.
Ladies and gentlemen.
That will conclude this evening's entertainment.
Thanks for listening to the Deal Room Podcast. To find out more about this episode and other episodes in the series, check out the show notes or head over to our website at thedealroompodcast.com.au.